My name is Julie Gomez, and I did my final analysis over Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. I focused more on the historical allusion to the Holocaust and the biblical allusion to Lazarus. The title itself alludes to Lazarus, obviously Lady Lazarus. She allude she talks about instead of Lazarus, in the story of Lazarus, he dies for 4 days, and Jesus resuscitates him, and he says that anybody who believes him and doesn't deny him, they will vicariously live. And he tells his sister this. Instead of Jesus saving Lady Lazarus, she ends up saving herself. Um, and one of the historical allusion was to the Holocaust, which did take a lot of criticism. People didn't really like that. How could you make kind of light or even reference to something so horrific, especially if you weren't a Jew yourself? But she ends up dying and burning in the crematorium like the Jews did in the concentration camps. And as she's burning, she survives, even though all signs of humanity were erased. She survives as a phoenix, which also makes an allusion to the Greek mythological community. And she said she warns God and Lucifer, the only two powerful men. Keep in mind, men that are powerful over her. And she does this almost as if to brag that her enemies have failed to kill her. She compares the Doctor to God and Lucifer. She makes several references to the Doctor, obviously, since she had a severe history with severe depression. She explains how society sees the Doctor as a god almost just because he can heal and he can prolong death. And in her eyes, she sees him as the devil because obviously when you're suicidal, you don't want to prolong death. And they have poked and found nothing but flesh and bones in there yet. They still are they're still disturbing her peace, and in her eyes, they're still just ruining her life because she doesn't want to have a life. As you can tell, Plath makes great use of imagery. She paints very different scenarios. She goes from painting, obviously, as I previously mentioned, all the times that the doctors have sat there and tried to figure out what's wrong with her. She even describes it once at one of her suicide attempts as I rocked shut as a shell. They had a call and call. They tried to pick off the worms. They tried to pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. This refers to one of her suicide attempts where she had to be resuscitated and brought back by the doctors, so she was medically dead, clinically dead, but also to the fact that her family and friends had to help her just to have a stable life and get her back on a healthy track, even though she didn't want to. Another scenario that she paints very vividly is the circus crowd when she does this big striptease. She says, the peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see them unwrap me hand and foot. This proves how she feels as if she's always being publicly scrutinized and always on display. She feels that nothing is truly hers, and that makes her feel very self-conscious as a person, which also, as many of you know, comparison is the thief of joy, which would just make her more depressed. Okay, in another one, she describes herself before she burns in the crematorium. She describes herself as a Jew. She says that she sees the gold wedding, a gold filling the wedding ring, and a bar of soap. This definitely makes you feel like you're, as a Jew, in a concentration camp. But back to the historical allusions, she definitely talks about while she was being criticized, she definitely put it in a different light. It's like the Jews who lost their identity, they lost their belongings, they lost everything they had. They had to have a completely different life. She felt this way as well. She felt that she was stripped of all of her identity, partly because she kind of let it happen herself by always feeling as if she was on display. And like the Jews, she felt that she lost her body. Depression overtook her. All the suicide attempts, she ended up not even being recognizable to herself. The Lady Lazarus was a different fascination to each different crowd. For example, to the medical crowd, it was a fascination. How could she be alive after all these suicide attempts? So of course they were poking and they found nothing but flesh and bones. And to the religious community, it was kind of amazing. How can you survive all these suicide attempts? And of course, but to herself, what she took pride in most was how exceptionally well she had committed suicides. She even goes as far to say that she can even do it in a cell. As you go on through the poem, you can definitely tell that she almost kind of boasts about it, and at the end of the imagery, she closes the poem with a final piece. She says, "And out of the ash I rise with red hair, eating men like air." Back to when I said that God and Lucifer were the only powerful men, this definitely tells, because she already thinks that she's greater than God in a way. Instead of Jesus saving her, she saved herself. So was really kind of just a poem. It's a confessional poem, really, talking about her severe illnesses. And if you do know anything about Sylvia Plath, you would definitely know that she definitely struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression, going as far as, I think, a year or two after this was written. She ended up sticking her head in a gas oven and committing suicide. She definitely encouraged the confessional kind of poetry, and up until this day, the main thing about this poem was its oral quality, the meter, and the rhyming. It has an irregular pattern, but it does have an irregular rhyme, but it does have an iambic pattern. The fact is that when you read it, it ends in 10-syllable lines. So when you read it, it's more of a dramatic set piece. So when you stop at the lines, it gives the audience the chance to think about exactly what Sylvia Plath said, and it even gives them, like I said, she did it for each crowd. She was a different fascination. So there are many ways you can interpret this piece, the same way that the Holocaust illusion definitely was not wanted to be taken lightly, but when you put it in her, when you see it in her perspective, she was alienated from society. She was no longer in her own body. It definitely makes sense. And I will be reading the poem just so you can fully grasp the oral quality and see exactly what I mean by a dramatic set piece. Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. I have done it again. 1 year in every 10. I manage it. A sort of walking miracle. My skin. Bright as a Nazi lampshade. My right foot. A paperweight. My face a featureless, fine. Jew linen. Peel off the napkin. Oh, my enemy. Do I terrify? The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth, the sour breath will vanish in a day. Soon, soon the flesh, the grave cave 8 will be, at home on me. And I, a smiling woman, I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. This is number 3. What a trash, to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments. The peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see. Them unwrap me hand and foot, the big striptease. Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time I meant to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut, as the seashell. They had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I've a call. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical. Come back in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute. A mew shout, a miracle! That knocks me out. There is a charge. For the eyeing of my scars, there is a charge. For the hearing of my heart, it really goes. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood, or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So, doctor, so, enemy. I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby, that melts to a shriek, I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, you poke and stir. Flesh, bone, there is nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. Or God, or Lucifer, beware, beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air.